Well, hello, everyone. This is Ken Hardison, and welcome to another episode of Grow Your Law Firm. And today we have the honor and privilege of having McKey and Rebekah Summerville and Sarah Waggoner, all from Vista Consulting. Thank you guys for being here with us today.
Thank you, Ken. It's a pleasure.
All righty. So today, people that don't know, McKey and I have been friends for years and years. We kind of started helping lawyers at the same time. Him more on the consulting side, me on the more on and management, me more on marketing. Now I do both, and but we all work together. And I speak at his events, he speaks at my events. Where there's plenty of business to go around everywhere the way I look at it. So I wanted him on here today because since COVID, there's a lot of things been going on, and it's hard to find people. I'm having a lot of our mastermind members are just cannot find lawyers and cannot find people to run their practices. You know what I'm talking about, like law firm administrators, COOs, whatever you want to call them. It depends on what size the firm is, but those two things, associate lawyers and these office managers, whatever you want to call them, are so hard to find right now. And then we also saw, and we did Tim, you helped me with this. We did the buying and selling law firms a couple of years ago at one of our summit events. And that was well received because what we're finding is baby boomers are now, people my age in their 60s are thinking about retiring, but they don't know how to go about, number one, to sell their firm, what to sell it for, but then how to get it ready to sell, because there's some things you have to do sometimes. If you really want to get top dollar, you got to get it to where it's sellable, right?
Absolutely.
So things like that. So leading into this day, I was talking to Tim. He said, we got all these new services. I said, well, why don't you come on my podcast and just tell people about them? At least they'll know they're out there. And then if they're interested, they can call you. If they're not, they don't have to. So Tim, if you want to tell your background or whatever, people that don't know you, you're pretty well known in the PI industry, I think, by now, sort of like me, but
well, I appreciate it, Ken. Thank you so much. And yeah, this podcast came about from Ken and I talking about what we're hearing in the industry and where there are pain points. Talent acquisition being one of them. Being able to afford and getting good financial information and an analysis in that area. Sarah Waggoner is going to talk about our talent acquisition for a few minutes, and then Rebekah Summerville, who's a CPA in our firm, is going to talk a little bit about her work and specialty and being a fractional or part-time CFO and what that means. And I'm going to try to wrap this up a little bit with talking about succession matters, mergers, acquisitions, maybe even touch upon, if we have time, a little bit of what we see, and Ken and I have talked about this going on in the industry, which is in fact being a little bit disrupted right now. So these services that we're going to talk about today were just born out of us recognizing a need. And, sometimes people start businesses to make a lot of money, and I think that's great, and that's certainly one reason. But you really have to deliver a service that is meaningful and valuable in exchange for those dollars and cents. And that's what we saw. And when we were listening to what was going on in the industry, having firms having a hard time attracting talent in whatever, lawyer, administration, paralegal, legal assistant, even the director of first impressions, or the receptionist. That's our term for the receptionist. It sometimes is hard to find, and so we created a spot or a place on our team for helping our clients find those people. And because of what we do and how we do it, we only work for plaintiff law firms. We kind of have the job descriptions and the characteristics of the top performing people in these areas. And so we're able to search in a little bit different way and be very targeted. So I'm going to turn it over to Sarah Waggoner and let her tell a little bit about her role, what she does, and how she preps some of our firms when they're wading into this talent acquisition water. So Sarah, you got the floor.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Tim. And thanks for having us on today, Ken. And I could talk about talent acquisition forever. That's what you want in a recruiter, right? Although I like to say I'm not a recruiter. That's how I start talking with every candidate and with every law firm. What I do is really targeted. Tim used that word, targeted talent acquisition. So if you need a recruiter or a staffing agency to constantly look for people for you, that's not us. We are people who are much more targeted in the types of roles that are needed within a law firm. And typically, I am the one doing that searching for that position. And I like to say up front, we are not headhunters. We are not sourcers. I am not putting an ad out there and then just sending you every candidate that applies. That would be easy. That's not what we do. So I'm really digging into every single resume that comes across the ad that I have placed for a specific firm. But it starts way before that, Ken. It starts with me getting to know the firm. I can only know what I know, and that is having a discovery call with a client of ours who tells me everything there is to know about their firm. Why would people want to come work for them? What do their processes look like? What do they need? They have to be very clear in working with me, and I establish that that's a relationship that's ongoing, telling me what they need, the kind of candidate that they want, sending me the job ads. Maybe they don't have a job ad. We have a lot of job ads. We have a lot of job descriptions that we could help with. But it's a partnership. So I place the ad on a variety of different job boards and whatnot. And then I am looking at every single candidate that applies to that ad. So I am looking through resumes. I am doing the phone screen. I am reaching out to clients so that our clients don't have to. And typically, we work a lot with firms that don't even have an HR department. So I really am the one doing all of that for them. It gets a little bit more complicated when larger firms do have an HR department, and that's okay. We just need to find the best way for me to fit into their system. And that is the relationship that I truly love. How can we help you get the right candidates in the door? Clarity is so important. Firms need to know what they're looking for so that they can tell me what to look for. So keeping those lines of communication open. I do the initial phone screens. Like I said, I'm sending candidates. I even do Zoom interviews, digging into that top grading interviews. Why did they leave their last job? Why do they want to work for this company? I'm the one asking those questions and then turning the candidate over to the firm should I think that they're a good culture fit. And from there, the part that I love is that every single client of ours can kind of customize where the process goes at that point. Do we do a Zoom interview with myself and the candidate and the firm? Do they come in for an in-person interview? Do they want to hire them on the spot? Everything kind of goes into this customizable way of doing things once we get those candidates in the door. And I cannot say enough about the candidate experience. It is just that. The labor market is bananas right now. Everybody knows that. And so your candidate experience is super important to me, and I'm protecting the firm's brand by making sure that I'm on top of communicating to clients or candidates, telling them, hey, I'm sorry, we're going a different way with this particular position, or the firm would really like to get you in for an in-person interview. It really goes back to communicating and telling these candidates, giving them feedback, even if it's negative, because that's a form of marketing. And so I feel like I'm that person that's helping to protect your brand at the same time bringing you quality candidates through the door. So
if you can't tell, Sarah's pretty passionate about this.
Oh yeah, but I do know that one of my mastermind members, Justin Lovely, was very pleased because he was really struggling to find a COO or whatever for his law firm, and I talked to him at the last meeting in Nashville, and he's very pleased with the process. So,
I love Justin Lovely. Justin, if you're listening, thanks for telling telling on me that we did a good job. But I will say, Ken, Justin and I kissed a lot of frogs. It was definitely a process, getting to the point of yes, this is my person, and that's just it. And I am super passionate about working through the process, working with the owner if they're the hiring manager, or maybe it's a paralegal team lead that needs another paralegal. The relationship is what's super important. And if I'm honest, most law firms don't have a relationship with the staffing agency or the recruitment firm or whoever they're looking to feed them candidates. And that's where I feel like we really set ourselves apart, because we're not feeding you candidates. We're really passionate about getting someone in the door who is in it for the long run. And so it's what makes it fun and interesting every day in the world of talent acquisition.
So you kind of help pre-qualify them. You know what they're not looking for. You know what their core values are. And if you feel like this person's core values, you take out a lot of the work in it into haggling.
Yeah, Ken, we found that people hire us for two reasons. One is they don't have time to do it, or they don't have the expertise to do it. And some's a combination of both, because we go through all of the vetting and give them well-qualified clients and or candidates that they then can select from. So Sarah, great job. Good job of putting that out there. I don't want to run us over time, but I'd love for Rebekah to talk a little bit about fractional CFO and part-time CFO work that we've gotten into. And maybe Rebekah, talk about why we did this, because you and I have been together a long time.
Right. Tim and I have worked together for over 25 years in the capacity of our traditional CPA firm. And a few years ago, we just kept getting more and more requests from our consulting ops clients, plaintiff law firms, for some assistance with financial matters, whether it be sort of bleeding into Sarah's talent acquisition, help us find a bookkeeper, help us train our bookkeeper. Do we need a full-time CFO? Do we need a controller? What do we need to get our books and records in order? And so we did several special projects and determined that this is really a niche that is very much needed in the world of plaintiff law firms. And while plaintiff law firms are a business, just like any other business, there are some unique nuances to plaintiff work, such as how to handle case costs on your books. Are you going to finance your case costs? Or are you going to pay for them through your operating account? Or are you going to do a line of credit? And then everybody knows the trust account management pitfalls that can happen. And is that being handled properly? And we've been in a lot of law firms, and we've seen what works and we've seen what doesn't work. And we can do everything from working with very financially reporting advanced law firms to standardize a set of reports for them that's useful. We have found that a lot of our law firm clients were getting a ton of data. They were getting many reports, and that's not necessarily more isn't better. Is it useful? Is it relevant information? Does it tell you what you need to know to manage your firm? Some firms, we get in and do a lot of cleanup with their books and getting their chart of accounts in order. Do these law firms have departmentalized financial statements? Meaning, are they attributing operating expenses to different types of legal fee income coming into their firms? That can be done multiple ways. We believe that it's important to measure those types of things for profitability, even down to doing fee center analysis. What fees are your individual teams bringing in, and where is your biggest profit center? How are you allocating your overhead? We can help train your bookkeepers. We can set up your chart of accounts and your books and records in the best way, in the Vista way is what I like to call it. And then we can train your accounting manager, bookkeeper, controller to use it in the best way. We can also evaluate our clients' tax structure. Are they set up in the best way? And even go so far as to helping with tax planning. We can work with their CPA, external CPA they have, and ask a lot of questions and make some recommendations there if needed. We then really one of our favorite things is to get into budgeting and planning. Set a budget for what you think is going to happen in your law firm for the next 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, and then measure it every month and compare what's actually happening. Is this what you thought was going to happen? And while it's difficult to target revenue a lot of times for a law firm, a lot of these case management softwares do have the capability to set up a pipeline and timing of when you expect cases to settle. So we work with our law firms clients in that capacity, and we can also assist you with integrating your case management software to your accounting software, whether it be, usually it's going to be QuickBooks, but we believe a lot of efficiencies in reporting can be gained there, a lot of efficiencies just in day-to-day input of data. Once those two things are integrated, can give you some very valuable management information.
Yeah,
Makes sense.
I tell you, Rebekah, 25 years ago, I hired a fractional CFO. Probably not as good as you because you've been in the law business. But the deal was, I got a guy there from Raleigh, and he didn't know nothing about the law business, but he knew numbers. And he really, I hired him for like 16 hours a month, like two days a month. He'd come in my office. We didn't have Zoom back then or anything, and it made a big deal. He actually created a deal to where we got to where we could project our income within 10% either side, even though it was contingency, because he looked at the past, the length of time on desk. He looked at our average fee. He just looked at all the numbers and said, "This is," and it was. I ain't gonna say it was perfect, but damn, it was a lot better than just taking a crystal ball out and hoping you see it. I thought it was great. So I think a lot of lawyers need that, and they think they can't afford it. But if you get a fractional one, it's just not that expensive.
That's where we plugged in, Ken, really, is thinking through, what makes the most sense for our clients. They're not big enough to have a full-time CFO possibly. Look, we hope to work ourselves out of a job. We hope to help them grow to a point where they need somebody in-house every day doing this. But we can stick our finger in the dike for that period of time while they're growing. Yeah. I can't tell you, one of the things we talked about when we were talking about what we were going to do today on this podcast was, what makes a healthy law firm. The first thing that we look at generally is their financial statements. And then, a lot of times we can't tell whether they're healthy or not by looking at the financial statements, which means, hey, there's some work to be done here. And the client is probably guessing about where they are. And we don't like to guess. That's what we say at Vista a lot. We don't like to guess. We want to test things. We want to get in there and look under the hood and see what's going on. So that's how these services were birthed out of our traditional consulting service that looking at all the operational things, vision, direction, case management, intake, the things that we normally do, which are still very, very important. But we kept just seeing that, hey, there's this personnel issue, there's this financial void, and that's how we got plugged in here. So we're happy with this and lucky enough to have Sarah and Rebekah to run the show for us.
Yeah, I like it. So tell me about the other services, Tim.
Yeah, well, a couple of the other ones I didn't want to point out that I personally get involved in is succession planning for law firms, and then merger and acquisitions. And even those two things are kind of related. Succession meaning, how is the current owner going to pass along this firm? And one of the ways is by merging or being acquired. The other way is identifying someone maybe within the firm or possibly a target outside the firm to acquire their law firm in specific instances. I say succession planning really has two components. One is you got to have two different types of plans. One is, I call it if the bus hits me plan. Okay, what happens if you're a sole owner and the bus hits you? Where are these cases going? What's going to happen? And we've developed a methodology of getting with either a team member on the team, someone outside, that is a contingency plan, that if this happens, if I become disabled and can't perform my job, or heaven forbid, am killed in a tragic event or something along those lines, there's a plan in place. And that does a lot of things. It gives the team a sense of there's something, if something happens to the owner, who is usually the driver in these situations, because I've seen, and I'm sure you've seen, when something tragic does happen and there is no plan, cases scatter like roaches when you turn the lights on. They go everywhere. And then all of a sudden you've got an executor or an executrix trying to track down your value in all these cases in 1,000 different places. And it becomes very difficult. So this actually creates value where there is none. So especially if you've got a succession plan where maybe the second in command in your firm is obligated to buy out the stock. And if there's a set formula, there's lots of different ways to do it. But again, we started seeing this. Two things I think are creating a market and a need for this type of service. One is simply the aging population. We've got a lot of law firm owners in that 60, 65 plus years of age, trying to just figure out, hey, what am I going to do with this? I've built this, but if something happens to me, I've got plenty of insurance. Maybe I've got money in the bank, but the value that I've created in my business could not be realized. And just going through the thought process and getting something set up in that, stopgap or that bus hits me plan, succession thought process is extremely valuable. And let's look at the very best case scenario. You live, then you need a plan that's more well thought out and, into the future. And you're able to really work with the new person, have a good transition. What does that mean? How do you value firms? We've been lucky enough to be in a lot of firms where we've helped them identify the value. And I'm not going to get into that. That's the thing that we talked about at your event a year or so ago. Lots of different ways to do that depending on types of firms. But these areas of law firm consultation, it grew organically. If you would have told me when we started and you and I met probably 15, maybe more than that years ago, that we would be talking about this kind of thing, I'd have told you were crazy. But times have changed. This industry, this plaintiff law firm industry is being disrupted by a lot of things right now. I mean, Arizona, and if you don't know what I mean by Arizona, that's where we have non-lawyer ownership there and in DC. Utah is just a breath away from probably making that happen. And I get the question all the time, well, when's it going to happen, Tim? It could be a very long time because every state has to buy in, if you will, or there could be one really big disruption where someone cites restraint of trade or something along this by, hey, only lawyers can own law firms, and that's a restraint of trade. I don't know if that's going to happen, and I don't want it necessarily to happen, but I feel like that the ball is already rolling. This is coming. So anyway, look, Ken, thank you for giving us the opportunity. Happy to answer any questions that you may have, or you think the attendees would be interested to hear more about.
Well, I just want to say one thing. Everybody thinks, well, I'm never going to die, but I've had two members of PILMA, one in their 40s and one in their 60s, die in the last 12 months.
Ouch.
Unexpectedly. So, you never know. Better to be safe than sorry. And I wanted to ask Sarah, so I was mainly just talking about CEOs or whatever, but so the way I understand this thing, you help find lawyers, associates, paralegals.
Yes. I like to say lawyers are a different breed. Lawyers are hard, but that doesn't mean bad. And that harder to find. Yes. The vetting process is the same. We say we would vet a director of first impressions just like we would vet an attorney. So that process is the same. So yes, to answer your question, I will look for lawyers. They are typically harder to find, but at the same time, it's how attractive is your ad? What is making your firm more attractive? What are you offering? And word of mouth says a lot. If you're looking for an attorney. The other thing that I ask firms who are looking for attorneys is, how trainable is your firm? Are you looking for someone really green right out of law school who you can train and mold into your way of doing things? Most of the time, though, Ken, they say, I need someone who can hit the ground running. That's what everyone says. And so while that's great, even the best people who can hit the ground running are going to have some sort of training in how a particular firm does things. So hitting the ground running is great, but there is still going to be a level of tools, training, and expectations that we think are uber important at every position within a law firm. And I will say too, it's super fun for me, and I know I've worked with Rebekah, when we can collaborate the talent acquisition portion with other areas within Vista. I work with a lot of Vista's consultants if they have an ongoing consulting client that needs talent acquisition. When we're mitigating the risk there to give them a really good candidate because we know their firm so well, that helps. That doesn't mean that that you can't use Vista's talent acquisition and not be an ongoing consulting client. Such was the case with Justin Lovely. It did take us longer to find someone because we didn't have that operational someone in the weeds knowing more about their firm. I hope that makes sense. It's really fun to collaborate with operations consultants and with Rebekah. We found lots of bookkeepers because we can do it together. So that's been super fun, and it helps when you have that operations consultant in there who knows the firm as well as anyone else.
Rebekah, so what's the average amount of hours you work per firm? You know, fractional means just part-time. I mean, I know it's probably different for bigger firm. Probably the bigger the firm, the more hours you work. But like, what's like the smallest deal you got and the biggest deal you got you're working on right now, as far as hours per month?
You know, I can't even answer that well because I do not track my hours, and it could be more concentrated in the front end for sure, because there's a huge learning curve. I've got to learn who their boots on the ground accounting people, what their capabilities are, and look at their financials and see what kind of shape they're in. Sometimes I can't even get to the fun stuff of budgeting, planning, and departmentalizing because we've got a big cleanup job to do. Other times I can jump right into the good stuff. And I will say sometimes the size of the firm is irrelevant where that's concerned, because I can have a small firm that just kind of piecemealed accounting together for a while, and they have a huge need to get better books and records so they can grow. So I may spend far more time on a smaller firm in the beginning than I do in a larger firm that's got some systems in place. And I don't think I mentioned this before, but one of the things we also do is assess your internal control structure. You know, help you develop a system of safeguards as best we can in a small firm, just to have some proper segregation of duties between accounting personnel.
Yeah, like having the bank statement mailed to your home address.
Correct, things like that.
Things like that. Ken, I want to jump in on the question about hours and time. You know, what we really try to do is work with the firm and try to understand their outcome. What outcomes do they want? And sometimes they have a good idea. They may not know the reports that may be meaningful for them from a financial standpoint. So it can be a little bit educational for the client too. Hey, if you had this report that showed you profitability by attorney or attorney team, how would that be useful for you? So we kind of prod along, and we're not trying to judge it by hours. We're trying to judge it by the outcome that the client wants. Okay. And then we just simply go do it.
I got you. So if anybody is interested, want to find out more about all these new services you guys are doing, my gosh, you just growing, man. Love it. Love it. Congratulations. How's the best way to get up with you?
We have our website, which is www.vistact.com. CT is for consulting team. So vistact.com, or our phone number is 225-383-2974. And if you're interested, I'll give you my email address, and it's tmckey@vistact.com. So, nothing's too large or too small, really. I mean, we want to, if a firm wants to grow, then that excites us. We want to get in and help them do that. We work for firms that are 100, 150 plus to firms that are 4 or 5 team members. So, and it's just as exciting to see them make their steps as it is the bigger guys. So,
I agree. I think it's maybe more exciting.
I agree.
Be honest with you, because you got more possibilities, Well, good deal. Well, listen, thank y'all so much for being on our podcast today. This is great. You are filling a void, a need that needs to be addressed. And for that, I appreciate it.
Ken, thank you so much for letting us be on.
Absolutely. Until next time, this is Ken Hardison, dedicated to your success.